All Sails Set, Chapter 5, My First Fight, and an Enemy Made. In our half-deck cabin, all was confusion. My sea chest was sloshing back and forth across the floor, its contents half spilled out and slopping about with those of the other 3 occupants. Pannikins, sea boots, duffel, and gear, what a jumble it was. Brick and I had recovered from our attack of seasickness, while Whit, with his greater experience of wind ships, had known scarcely a twinge. But Lanny was laid out in his bunk, the only sign of life from him being a low groan now and again. He had small interest in the chaos of the half-deck, or in anything else for that matter, unless it might have been terra firma. That means, like, firm ground. "One good thing about that blow last night," observed Whit, wringing out his reefer before putting it on. "No more farmyard chores for us. Lord Lummy." Lum? Then, when that wave hit us, there wasn't so much as a hog's bristle or bent nail to show where the old man's pigsty had been. Brick felt his jaw with rueful fingers. It was still swollen from his early encounter with Mr. Jones. "Too bad the first mate couldn't have been in the pigsty instead of that old pig," he observed. "That's where he belongs anyhow." Whit grinned. "Didn't I warn you that bucko was a toughen? You'd oughter had more sense than to try and be smart with him. Didn't I serve under him for a year in the Fair Haven in his watch too?" Whittlesey, said he to me at the end of that voyage. "I've been to sea, man and boy, for 30 year, but you're the wuss sailor I've ever seen. You'd orter shipped on a whaler," says he. "There's enough of the bone in your head. That's why he didn't pick me for his watch again this trip, I calculate." Whit drew the reefer over his head and sat down on the edge of his bunk to struggle with his shoes. Shoes, feet, and socks were still wet, and it made hard going. "There was luck to that," said I. "Aye, and that's a fact. Better get up on your pins, Lanny," advised Brick, "or the buckle will be down here and haul you out by the scruff of your neck." The only response from the bunk was a low groan. "Chips knows a good cure for seasickness," I suggested. "A quart of warm seawater now." The groan came louder from the bunk this time, and I desisted for the common good. It was astonishing, I thought, as I dipped my raw hands into the pail of hot beef pickle, the number of cuts and bruises that we of the half-deck had picked up in our few short days at sea, the unexpected plunges of the ship, for which nothing in our lives ashore had prepared us, hurled us continually against the jutting angles of wood and iron. Already our hands were puffed and bleeding with unaccustomed hauling on wet ropes. New sets of muscles whose existence we had never dreamed of made themselves known, each with a separate ache. But greatest hardship of all, we could not get enough sleep. 4 hours on and 4 off, theoretically, but our skipper was a driver out to make us a record passage around the Horn. As a rule, no sooner had we closed our eyes when a mighty clatter set up on the scuttle and a voice roared, "All hands, shorten sail!" That order meant business. We soon learned that if it was just all hands, you could take a reasonable amount of time to it, but shorten sail meant that you must reach the deck at one bound or take the consequences and the rope's end. The orders themselves were couched in a language that might as well have been Fijian, for aught we could gather its meaning. For example, at the command, "All hands shorten and furl sail," we apprentices could only stand by stupidly as the older men manned clew ropes, bunt lines, leech lines, downhauls, and brails, having the bunt ropes and jiggers overhauled and ready for hooking to the gluts, and hands ready by the halyards, outhauls, and bowlines to let them go. "Aloft, topman!" came the mate's second command. He allowed the men time to reach the futtock rigging. Then, "Aloft, lower yardmen!" Then it all came fast and furious. Haul taut, clew up, haul down, lie out and furl. Gather up that slack proper and pass the leeches. Skin that sail smooth in the headband. You in the blue shirt, keep that bunt square in the slings or I'll knock 7 bells out of you. Lie in, down booms and down from aloft. Small wonder that we first voyagers could only stand with mouth agape at such a bewildering performance. We were still too green to be allowed aloft, and I looked forward with dread to the moment when the order, aloft and furl, should be directed at me. How would I fare, 200 feet above a plunging deck, trying to fist sail in the teeth of a gale? Resolutely, I forced the prospect out of my mind. Sooner or later it would come, that moment, but until then, the bell that struck in our watch sounded on the wheelhouse, and the forecastle bell took up the echo. Brick and Wit and I tumbled up on the deck, leaving Lanny groaning in his bunk below. Smoke issued from the funnel of the galley, and we filed forward with pannikins in hand. Hunger by now was gnawing at our belly, our healthy young vitals, and we needed no encouragement to break our fast. The galley of the Flying Cloud, that means the kitchen, was placed for'ard. Here, within a wooden box some 12 feet square, the 2 cooks carried on their endless work. The African and the Fijian were known impartially as Doctor. An opening in the side of the galley looked out on the main deck. Through it we could see the Fijian stirring furiously among his pots and pans, while the African's black face framed itself in white bulkhead as we filed past. To each of us he ladled out our rations. Speculation ran high as to what it was we ate. Only the cooks and the Almighty knew the terrible secret. It passed by the name of lobscouse, and if you ask me what was in it, to this day I can only hazard a guess. Pilot bread, pounded to bits, perhaps a hunk of salt horse, a scrap of pork, a moldy potato or 2, all stewed up together with this and that. The sea puts up with no coddling of her men, and we were to be held strictly to our pound and pit. The Spaniards, who boast a knack with proverbs, have one to the effect that hunger makes the best sauce. An apt observation, since before long we relish our scouse, with the keen edge of the sea appetite, and cleaned up our pannikins till they shone in the sun like a bald man's plate. So I think it means they're so hungry that the food tastes good even though it's really nasty. The deep water men accepted this fare naturally, as they accepted everything else at sea. Not for them the eggs from the old man's table, or the pies, or the soft bread. They were forecastle hands, and they knew their fare. But Jeter Sneed and the others of his stripe, who had been raising their voices in complaint of one thing or another ever since leaving the port, early seized upon the food as a cause for special grievance. "Look at this dish of bilge," commented Sneed in a loud voice, holding up his pannikin for all to see. "Swill fit for hogs, that's what it is. It's a blinkin' outrage to offer it to men." He rose to his feet and crossed to the weather bulwark, where I was finishing the remainder of my scouse. I had made no effort to hide my opinion of the man, and he knew it. As he drew directly abeam of me, he emptied his pan to windward. The wind caught the bilge and flung it back in my face, so he tossed his whole plate of food, and the wind blew it right at his face. "Did you do that on purpose?" I shouted, seeing red. "Suppose I did? What then?" The man's twisted sneer blurred before my eyes. I cracked him across the face with all the strength I could muster. Sneed drew in his breath like the hiss of a snake. "You!" he cursed, and reached for his sheath knife. "Here, here!" roared Mr. Andrews, coming around a corner of the house, If there's any fighting aboard this ship, it's going to be fair and square. Bare fists, and not else. Up on the forecastle head, you two, and the best man wins. I was in for it. I looked at Sneed's rangy height and realized that I was going to get a good drubbing. Well, maybe I could get in a few good ones on the packet rat before he laid me out. As we marched toward the forecastle, surrounded by all the free men of the watch, Brick and Wit took me each by an arm and whispered advice in my hot ears. He's got a foot more reach than you, cautioned Brick, so keep in close and don't give him a chance to swing. Aye, that's the part of wisdom, Wit amended. Keep in close and catch him with a right hook to the jaw. Then follow it up with a left uppercut before he can say hunky-dory. That'll take the wind out of his mainsails. Keep in close, right hook to the jaw, then a left uppercut. Sounded easy when you said it like that. Of course, Sneed wouldn't have any ideas of his own. Just going to stand there like a bollard post and let me wang at him? I'll ship what's left of you home to your mother, grinned Wit. I'll ship what's left home to your mother, grinned Wit, giving me a dig in the ribs. Too bad, Brick chuckled. They didn't give you time to make your will. I'd speak up for that spyglass of yours. Oh, stow it, I answered testily. The men formed a circle on the forecastle head. The ship was sailing full and by, no call to touch or sheet or halyard. Here was a pleasant diversion for a man to while away a watch. Come on, I don't know what that is. Come on, Bays. Ready for action, bellowed Mr. Andrews. And don't forget, I'm here to see there's fair play. Any dirty work out of you, and you'll know the end of my boot. I stripped off my shirt and tightened up my belt, the way I'd seen professional fighters do, mustering up the while such show of confidence as I was able. Remember what I told you, cautioned Brick. At it, Biss. Eat 'em up, Jeet. Sneed had pulled off his shirt, and I saw the muscles stretched like wires over his lean carcass. I squared off and stuck out my chin at a bellicose angle. For a second I thought I saw a flick of fear in Sneed's eyes. Afraid? I jeered. I'm going to kill you, came his answer. Whew. Perhaps it was the conviction behind the words that sent me forward at a bound. Keep in close. Hook right. I closed my eyes and swung with all my might. My fist connected with a crack and jarred my arm to the shoulder. Left uppercut. My left drove viciously and my knuckles buckled under the blow. There was a thud and a groan. I opened astonished eyes. I expected at any moment to be annihilated. There was Sneed, face down on the deck. Get back, yelled the mate at me. You've done enough. I went cold. Had I killed the man? What a beginning to my life at sea. I heard voices shouting excitedly, Up at him, Jeet! Lay into him, Thatch! And from the mate, A bucket of water there! Tail onto it! My heart was in my mouth as Mr. Andrews dashed water in Sneed's face. Would he ever open his eyes? He blinked for a moment, as if he couldn't believe his senses, then looked up at me. I felt my blood chill before the malevolence of his eyes. Thatcher wins, fair and proper, cried the mate. Up on your pins, Sneed, and shake hands. I'll see him rot first, snarled Sneed. He moved close up to me, and as long as I live I will remember the concentrated venom in his words. I'll square this up with you, Thatcher, if I die for it, he said. Come, interposed the mate. That's no way for a man to lose a fight. Sneed slunk off with his crony, Slim Harkins, and disappeared in the gloom of the forecastle. As I made my way back into the waist, Brick and Wit cracked me on the back. See what my good advice did for you, gloated Brick. It was that uppercut that finished him off, the scum. Gee, Whitaker, why didn't you tell us you had a punch like a mule's left leg? Wit demanded. Caleb Winthrop joined us and tapped me on the arm. Take my advice and keep to the windard that sea lawyer from now on, he warned. He's a bad 'un, and no mistake. Aye, assented Tom Plunkett. 'Tis lucky for you the old man had the mates grind the point off every man's sheath knife, or you'd be slit from clew to earring afore morning. It didn't need those gloomy forebodings to assure me that I had made an enemy. I had whipped Jeter Sneed in front of the whole watch. I'll square this up with you, Thatcher, if I die for it, he said. Young as I was, I knew that these words were not idly spoken. He would make good his threat if ever I gave him the opportunity, alow or aloft. Well, I would follow Caleb Winthrop's advice and keep to windward of the man whenever possible. It wouldn't be an easy feat within the narrow space of a ship, but there was a new confidence running like fire through my veins, a consciousness of discovered strength. The sweat of victory salted my lips, and I relished its taste. I had won my fight. With the wind still holding half a gale, the flying cloud fled due southeast. Now that the old man had tested her out and sprung her mainmast doing it, he drove her less brutally of necessity. We of the half-deck and the forecastle felt the release from the strain in a more regular resumption of our watches. Turning out on deck with Brick Warner, the morning after my fight with Jeter Sneed, Mr. Andrews' voice hailed us. Lay aloft, you lubbers, and furl them ryals. The dreaded moment had come. Involuntarily we paused. Tail on to it, you sojers. Brick scrambled into the fore shrouds, and I into the main. Here, don't hold on to them ratlines. It's the shrouds you want, me boys. Me boys? Mr. Andrews stood there with his arms folded across his broad chest, grinning mightily. And no looking down, remember. Cautiously, I made my way upward, my cold hands clutching the shrouds with a beginner's grip. I didn't know then that men who fell from the rigging were usually old hands grown careless. Looking neither to right or left, up I climbed until I was stopped by the futtock's shrouds at the head of the lower rigging. The ship was heeling at such an angle that it seemed as if the wind itself helped speed me up the narrowing path of ratlines. The futtock shrouds stretch outward to the main top. To negotiate them, you have to turn on your back and with your feet toward the mast and head out in space, haul yourself up by sheer muscle. Out over these futtocks, I pulled myself, scarce daring to breathe. Go on, bellowed the mate. I reached for a hold in the topmast rigging. Step by step I climbed up the conglomeration of ropes that seemed to have no end. How different they looked, drawn on paper in Donald McKay's drafting room. As far up as I could see, they stretched like a web of a mammoth spider, and seemingly no more secure for a man to thrust his life to. My legs felt jerky, my arms nerveless. I was sick and dizzy as I paused at the topmast head. This is crazy, I argued with myself. The Royal can't furl it if I do reach it. Look at Brick. How'd he ever get up there? Ahead of me on the foremast, halfway up to the cross trees, was Brick. Up with you, Thatcher, came the mate's inexorable voice from below. I looked upward at the maze of ropes leading to the haven of cross trusses. What an endless stretch of them between me and the platform, I thought as I climbed. The cross trees, more difficult to surmount than the futtocks had been. I looked longingly at the lubber's hole and wished that I had the courage to try and sneak through it, but I still retained sense enough to know that should I try it, I'd catch fire and brimstone when I regained deck. With many a misgiving, I laid hold of the cross-tree ropes and pulled myself up to the wooden platform. A cry of relief broke from me, and I sank down to my knees. That was over. "Keep going there!" yelled the mate from below, his voice pitched to carry across the widening distance. And now my brain was empty of every thought but my insecurity and the terrible fear of plunging to the deck. But there was no defying that inexorable voice. "Growl you may, but go you must," says the sailor, and it's a fact. Gingerly I picked my way up to the topgallant rigging. Not so long a climb as the topmast. It came to an end at the topgallant masthead. I laid hold of the topgallant yard and planted both my feet in the foot rope, swinging from its stirrups beneath. There I clung for dear life. The skysail yard had been struck, and nothing remained above my head but the bare pole of the royal mast, crossed by the royal yard. For the first time I dared a furtive glance downward. The blood froze in my veins. Oh, he wasn't supposed to look down, was he? What must it be like up here in a gale, clinging to this yard with one hand, fisting sail with the other? I shuddered at the thought of it. The mate's voice, diminished by distance, broke in on my speculations. "Go on! Up with you, you blasted soger!" For a moment I paused, torn between the necessity for going up or the impulse to return to deck and take the consequences. I looked up at the royal mast. If I failed, I should never have to face Messina Clark or anyone else again, for I should be dead. With one hand, I reached out and caught the royal backstay, swinging my feet free of the ratlines. There was a split second when I hung by a single hand, before my numb legs could twist themselves around the backstay. A sheer drop of 200 feet. Then I was astride the royal yard. As soon as I caught my breath, I was mightily proud of myself. I looked up at the remaining feet of bare pole, surmounted by the ball of the main truck. That was the last thing between me and the sky, and shouted, "By the Great Horn Spoon! Captain Clark, I did it!" Now I dared to look around me, forgetting the pull of gravity. Dizziness had disappeared. Nothing overhead but a sky swept with mares' tails. Below, the sharp-edged horizon, forming a perfect circle, under my feet an acre of canvas drummed tight in the breeze. And there was I, riding through space on the great arc cut by the masthead, the sun washing with gold the white curving sails. To be there was to be as close to heaven as a man had any right to demand in this world. In front of me, on eyes level, rose the spire of the foremast. I saw Brick Warner then, clinging to the royal yard. We shouted to each other and waved with one hand free. "Ahoy up there!" came the mate's voice. "For all that royal! And brisk about it!" Cautiously I lay out on the yard, my feet fumbling for the foot rope. I cast adrift the gaskets. The sail whipped away from me and thrashed like a banner. A pretty pickle, I thought, that square of heaviest cotton duck, slatting and banging above my head. One glancing blow from it, and I would be flung like a crumb from a carpet into the sea below. The motion of the ship, slight enough on deck, was magnified at this great height, and the royal yard was cutting capers across the sky. At first, I dared do nothing but hang on for life and limb. "Tail onto it up there!" I picked up the bunt and lay to it. Clutching the canvas as best I could, I dragged it in slowly, bit by bit. After many luckless attempts, I was able to lay hold of the gasket. Then I pulled it as tight as I could and made it fast. Gingerly, I crawled on my belly out to the weather yard arm. The banging sail was like to knock me spinning. Somehow, holding to the jackstay with desperate grip, I clutched the sail with my free hand and began the struggle. Time and again it whipped itself out of my grasp, just as I had begun to make it fast to the yard. I felt a jab of pain as the nail ripped off my index finger. Oh! My muscles ached with the strain. Each time the sail tore itself free, the whole heart-rending business had to be gone through again. At last, when I felt plumb tuckered, I succeeded in getting the gaskets past and the sail lashed to the yard. The leeward side gave me less trouble. At last, the sail was snugged fast. It has taken me the best part of an hour. I climbed into the rigging, noting out of the clue of my eye that Brick was still fighting, the windward gaskets of his sail. I reached the topgallant rigging when a voice hailed me, the mate's. "Did you call that a ship-shape job?" he shouted. "Yes," I yelled back. "What?" Yes, sir, I amended. Then lay out there and make a better job of it, or by the powers, I'll have you keel-hauled. There was nothing to do but climb aloft, hand over weary hand, and cast loose once more those hard-fought gaskets. I let them go as reluctantly as if they'd been my hold on life. The freed sail ballooned out over my head, and there was a whole heartbreaking job to be gone through with again. Determinedly, I tackled it, dragging in the canvas inch by inch. Once again, the gaskets passed. A little brisker this time. Finally, it was all snug. I figured that I had clipped a good 10 minutes off the first trial. Once more, I swung into the rigging for the descent. Lay out that yard, you bloody soldier, and furl that royal proper. Aye, growl you may, but go you must. Swallowing my wrath as best I might, I lay out on that cursed yard and once more cast loose the sail. Bit by bit, I fought to take it in again. Then, with the uttermost care, I skinned down every bulge in the canvas, tight as my aching muscles could pull. And I was forced to admit that this was a neater job than my 2 previous attempts. But I doubted that I had clipped any time from the operation. My arms and legs felt like lead. When I swung into the rigging for the descent, my fingers were nerveless, and I sank down thankfully on the platform of the cross trees. Cast adrift that ryle, bellowed the mate furiously, or come down here and take the rope's end. For one wild moment, I thought of accepting his invitation. No punishment could have been worse than this. My hands were covered with blood, and every muscle of my body twitched with a separate ache. The man's an inhuman monster, I thought. I hope he ends in a shark's belly, or dies of scurvy, or... With a sensation of utter despair, I climbed out on the royal yard and cast loose the sail once more. Oh my gosh. Cannot even imagine. The poor kid has been up there for probably over an hour. Oh, after 4 hours of it, I was permitted to slide down to the deck. Can you imagine?
Nope.
It was my watch below, and I fell into my bunk more dead than alive. Body and brain alike were numb. A hard school, you may say. Aye, that it is. But stowing a royal was something I was able to pride myself on forever after. Rousing out of my stupor shortly, I called out to Wit in the bunk below, "Where's Brick?" "Last I saw of him, he was fisting the foreroyal." "Hasn't come down yet," was his answer. I fell into an exhausted slumber, dreaming that I was stowing sail on a mighty yard supported by no mast. And every time I jammed my fist into the billowing canvas, the canvas turned into a leering face, while Jeter Sneed's voice mocked, "I'll square this up with you, Thatcher, if I die for it."